The night she kicked me out, the air in the house felt colder than it had ever been. I still remember standing in the hallway, my backpack slung over one shoulder, clutching the few belongings I had managed to grab. I was 16, terrified and completely alone. My stepmother, Denise, had just thrown open the front door and looked down at me with a mixture of anger and disgust. "You're leaving," she said, her voice sharp, almost triumphant. "And don't think about coming back. You don't belong here." I froze, my chest tightened. My heart pounded so loudly that I thought she might hear it. My father, who had always been too weak to stand up to her, sat silently in the living room, avoiding eye contact, pretending this wasn't happening. He had never said a word to stop her. Not once in all the years she'd belittled me, insulted me, and made me feel invisible. "I have nowhere to go," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I can't just figure it out," she snapped, cutting me off. "You're 16. You're independent now. Pack your things and leave." I remember the moment the front door slammed shut behind me. The sound echoed through the empty hallway, and for a second, I felt like the world itself had abandoned me. I walked out into the night, the chill cutting through my jacket, and realized just how powerless I truly was. For weeks, I slept wherever I could, friends' couches, the library floor, and even under the stairwell of an abandoned building when it rained. Hunger, fear, and shame became constant companions. I was the kid everyone in my neighborhood whispered about, the one my stepmom had thrown out like trash. People always asked me how I survived. The truth? I had no choice. I worked multiple part-time jobs, delivering pizzas, washing dishes, and folding laundry at a laundromat. I had to. I had no family to support me, no safety net, no one who cared whether I lived or died. But every day I faced, every night I survived, planted a seed inside me, a seed of determination. By the time I turned 18, I had saved every penny I could. I was enrolled in community college, juggling studies and work, but I never lost sight of my goal. That goal? One day I would turn my life around. One day I would have power, independence, and security. And one day I would ensure that the people who had kicked me down, the people who had doubted me, would see exactly what I was capable of. It wasn't just about revenge, not at first. At first, it was survival. But as the years passed, that survival turned into ambition. Every time I passed a wealthy neighborhood or saw a family gathering where laughter and love flowed freely, I reminded myself I would have that life. I would be in control. I started small. I learned everything I could about real estate, investments, and property management. I took classes online, read books by successful entrepreneurs, and worked tirelessly in every job I could. I built a network of mentors and advisors, always keeping my goal in mind: independence and security. And then, I got lucky. My first property came through a small inheritance from a distant relative I barely knew. It wasn't much, just a tiny two-bedroom house on the outskirts of the city, but I saw potential. I renovated it myself, learned how to manage tenants, and slowly, steadily, I began to build my portfolio. By the time I was 25, I had a small empire of rental properties and investment accounts. I wasn't rich by Hollywood standards, but I was wealthy compared to where I had been. More importantly, I was free. Free from her tyranny, free from my father's weakness, and free from the constant fear of being at someone else's mercy. But there was one property I had always dreamed of owning, the house where I had grown up, or at least, the one my stepmother had turned into a prison for me. The same house she had kicked me out of, the same place where she had laughed at my fear and told me I didn't belong. I didn't act impulsively. I waited, carefully watching. I tracked the property's value, learned about her finances, and discovered the cracks in her empire. And when the opportunity finally presented itself, when she decided to put the house on the market for tax reasons, I was ready. I didn't just buy it. I outbid everyone. I signed the papers. And for the first time in my life, I was in control. The day I got the keys, I stood on the front porch, looking at the house that had once been a place of rejection and humiliation. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. For a moment, I allowed myself to remember the fear, the nights of hunger, and the endless struggle. Then I smiled, because I knew what was coming next. Denise would call, she would beg, she would try to manipulate, and charm her way back into the house she had lost. And I would decide for the first time ever, how she would be treated, not as my stepmother, not as the person who had cast me aside, but as someone who had underestimated me for a lifetime. This was the moment I had waited for since I was 16. The moment my power and perseverance would collide with her arrogance and cruelty. And I was ready. The first call came the morning after I received the keys. My phone buzzed insistently, lighting up with her name, Denise. I stared at it for a moment, a quiet thrill running through me. 16-year-old me would have answered trembling, terrified of her anger. 26-year-old me, however, was calm. I didn't need to answer. She already knew where I was. But of course, she didn't give up easily. By the afternoon, she was at the gate. I saw her in the rearview mirror of my car, storming up the driveway like she owned the place. Her pearls were slightly askew, her perfume overpowering. The same entitled look on her face that had haunted my teenage years was back in full force. I stepped out calmly, locking my car behind me. She froze when she saw me, only for a second, but I caught it. That split second of recognition was all I needed. "Alex," she began, her voice wavering, trying to hide the panic she felt. I just wanted to talk about the house. Surely we can come to some arrangement." I held up a hand. "There is no arrangement, Denise. The house is mine now." My voice was steady, cold, and controlled. I saw the anger flash in her eyes, quickly replaced by disbelief. "You can't do this. This is my home. My family home," she exclaimed, the words spilling out like a child throwing a tantrum. "Your father. He'll never let you." I smiled faintly. "Funny you mention him. He didn't say a word the day you kicked me out. Funny how silent he can be when the roles are reversed." Her face turned red. "That was different." "That was different?" I interrupted, my tone sharp. "Different is when someone destroys your life at 16 and then expects you to worship them at 26. That was cruelty. This is business, and I run this house now." Denise's lips trembled. She had always been a master manipulator. But for the first time, I saw her doubt. She tried to adjust her composure, straightened her shoulders, and raised her chin. "You can't treat me like this. I've raised you, sort of. I mean, you've belittled me, thrown me out, and mocked every dream I ever had," I said, my voice rising slightly, not in anger, but in finality. "I spent 10 years building a life from scratch, while you lived in comfort and assumed I'd always be beneath you. You gambled on my weakness. You lost." She took a step back, as if the words physically hit her. I could see the panic in her eyes now, the fear I had imagined, the fear of someone finally standing tall against her tyranny. I didn't know," she stammered, almost pleading. You thought I'd stay small. You thought I'd never be able to stand on my own. That's what you were counting on." I walked past her, into the house, letting the gate click shut behind me. "But here I am. And from this day forward, you don't get to decide anything in my life, or my house." She followed, her heels clacking loudly on the newly polished hardwood. "You can't just— This isn't fair," she cried, desperate, teetering between indignation and hysteria. I stopped at the living room, the same room where she had once thrown me out at 16. The memories hit me for just a second. Every insult, every tear, every night of fear, but I suppressed them. I was no longer that scared kid. I was in control. I gestured toward the grand staircase. "You can stay in this house as a guest, under my rules. You will respect the property and anyone who lives here. Step out of line, and you leave. Do you understand?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Yes," she finally said, voice shaking. "Good," I said, my tone final. "Because this house no longer exists for you in the way it once did. It exists for me, and anyone I choose to welcome. You've had your chance. That chance ended the day you kicked me out." For the next few weeks, she tried everything she could to regain control. Calls, texts, and even attempted manipulation through my father. But nothing worked. I had reinforced boundaries, made clear rules, and stuck to them. She had underestimated me for years, and now she learned firsthand that I was not the child she had once dismissed. Then came the unexpected. She started begging. Not threats, not manipulation, real, raw begging. She showed up at my office, at the grocery store, even at friends' parties. Everywhere I went, she found a way to make her presence known, pleading, apologizing, promising to change, offering money, anything to regain her footing. I listened once, maybe 3 times, but I was careful. I didn't react with anger. I reacted with strategy. Every interaction was controlled, deliberate. I didn't give her power over me again. I wasn't cruel. I was disciplined. I let her see that her past actions had consequences, and that those consequences were real and lasting. Finally, she realized that no pleading or gift could undo the past. The house was mine. The rules were mine. And for the first time, she truly understood what it meant to have someone who had been underestimated finally rise above. And in that moment, I saw something else, a profound sense of closure. It wasn't satisfaction in revenge. It was satisfaction in justice. I had survived, I had grown, and I had built something strong enough to withstand her arrogance. The confrontation had ended, but the story was far from over. The final chapter, the part where she would truly understand the cost of her cruelty and the power of perseverance, was still ahead. Owning the house wasn't just about reclaiming my past, it was about rewriting the story of my life. Once Denise realized I was serious, she backed off, mostly, but the lingering tension reminded me of why I had fought so hard. Every decision I made in those early months was a declaration. I was no longer the powerless kid she had kicked out. I was in charge. The first order of business was renovating the house, not just physically, but symbolically. I brought in designers, craftsmen, and contractors who understood that this house would no longer be a symbol of cruelty and control. Every corner, every hallway, every room was refurbished with care. I didn't want just a nice home. I wanted a statement. The walls would echo dignity and strength, not fear and humiliation. Denise, of course, tried to interfere. She would send texts, emails, and occasionally show up unannounced, critiquing every choice I made. "That color is too bold," she'd complain. "You can't put that furniture there, it's all wrong." But I had learned patience and restraint. I listened politely, nodded, and proceeded with my vision. Nothing she said could undermine years of preparation, knowledge, and hard work. I also transformed the house into a hub for opportunities, investments, property management, and even mentoring for young adults who, like me, had been underestimated. I wanted to turn a space of past pain into a place that empowered others. Slowly, I started inviting people over, ambitious friends, hard-working professionals, and even local charities. The house, once a stage for judgment and ridicule, became a beacon of possibility. Denise watched from the sidelines, her attempts to control or belittle me growing more desperate. But the more she tried, the clearer it became that I had already won. She could criticize, complain, and even manipulate her way into awkward social situations. But the truth was undeniable. I was thriving, and she had no part in it. Then came the opportunity to expand. With my growing portfolio and solid reputation in real estate, I decided to acquire additional properties in the neighborhood. I bought the house next door, renovated it, and eventually connected the two homes with a shared garden and communal space. It wasn't just about real estate, it was about creating a legacy, a symbol that someone who had been kicked out could rise higher than anyone could imagine. Denise's behavior became more erratic as I expanded. She began attending social events, hoping to encounter me and reassert her presence, only to be met with polite, controlled resistance. Each time she tried, I maintained my composure, demonstrating strength through silence and action rather than confrontation. My friends and colleagues started noticing the transformation too. They began asking for advice, mentorship, and collaboration, and I eagerly shared my knowledge and network. In one memorable instance, Denise attempted to embarrass me at a neighborhood association meeting. She strutted in, dressed to impress, and started making loud comments about my investments and property choices. "Oh, I see you've taken over your father's little inheritance," she sneered. "I hope you know what you're doing. Some things are better left to experience, not ambition." I looked at her calmly and replied, "Actually, I've studied this for years, consulted with experts, and made all decisions with careful planning. If you'd like, I can show you the numbers and projections. I think you'll be impressed." The room fell silent. Denise's face turned red, and for the first time in years, she had no word. She had expected me to crumble, to apologize, to feel shame, but instead, I stood tall, confident, and in control. It was the same feeling I had imagined since I was 16, and it was sweeter than any revenge I had ever imagined. As time passed, the house became more than just a home. It became a statement, a community hub, and a source of pride. I hosted dinners, workshops, and networking events, each one reinforcing my success and independence. People who had once doubted me, or who had never believed in me, began to recognize my accomplishments. Denise, meanwhile, became a peripheral figure. She tried to maintain relevance, but everyone saw her desperation. The contrast between her dependence and my independence was stark. The stepmother who once held power over me now had no influence whatsoever. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had turned the very thing she had used to harm me into a monument to my own perseverance and capability. One day, after a particularly successful community event, Denise appeared at my door again. She looked disheveled, her usual confidence nowhere in sight. I invited her in, not out of mercy, but out of principle. I was not cruel, only firm. I don't know what to do, she admitted, voice trembling. I never thought you'd achieve this. You thought I'd stay small, I finished for her. You thought you could shape my life, define my worth, and decide my future. You were wrong. She nodded, tears in her eyes, not the tears of triumph, but the tears of realization. For the first time, she truly understood the consequences of her actions. The house she had treated as her personal kingdom was no longer hers. The person she had dismissed and abused was now the one setting the rules, building the legacy, and controlling the environment she once dominated. I had done more than reclaim a house. I had reclaimed my life. I had proven that the person you underestimate at 16 could rise, could conquer, and could turn cruelty into motivation. Every step of my journey, every night of fear, every day of work, every sacrifice had led to this moment. And in that moment, I understood something crucial. True power isn't about retaliation. It's about growth, perseverance, and building something so strong that the people who doubted you can no longer affect you. Denise realized this too. She stayed quietly, observing as the house and my life continued to flourish. She understood that the dynamic had shifted irrevocably. The student had become the master. The powerless had become powerful, and the house that once represented rejection now represented triumph. The stage was set for the final act, the moment when she would fully recognize that her attempts to control, humiliate, and dismiss me were not just failures, they had become the very foundation of my success, and I was ready to show her exactly how far I had come. It was a crisp Saturday morning when I decided the final act had arrived. 10 years of quiet determination, sleepless nights, sacrifices, and relentless work had all led to this moment. The house that had once been my prison, was now my kingdom. And it was time for Denise to fully understand that the rules had changed. I arrived at the house early, before anyone else. The sunlight spilled across the freshly polished floors, glinting off the renovations, the upgraded security systems, and the new furniture. Everything had been meticulously curated. Every detail, every fixture, every room was now a testament to my vision, my perseverance, and my independence. By mid-morning, Denise appeared at the gate. She had already tried calling, texting, and showing up uninvited countless times, but I had learned the power of patience and control. I didn't meet her at the gate this time. I waited inside, calmly preparing for the moment when she would step through my doors. She didn't knock. She barged in, as if she had the right. "Alex!" she shouted, her voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. We need to talk about." I stepped forward, calm, collected, and immovable. "Denise?" I said, my voice quiet but commanding. "We are talking. Right here. Right now." Her eyes flicked around the house, taking in the transformations, the grandeur, the elegance, the attention to detail. It was undeniable. The house that she had once controlled through fear and intimidation now radiated power, sophistication, and order, and I was at the center of it all. "You can't do this," she blurted, her words shaking. "This is still my house, my father's house. You can't just take it and—" "I did take it," I interrupted, stepping closer. "Legally, ethically, and with every ounce of hard work I've poured into my life. You don't get to define my worth, my success, or my property. That ends today. Her face went pale. But I raised you, I cut her off. You didn't raise me. You hindered me. You tried to break me. You thought fear and control could define who I became. But they didn't. I did. Every late night, every job, every investment, every step toward building a life I could be proud of was done without you, and in spite of you. Denise's hands trembled as she took a step back. I saw the arrogance, the entitlement, and the false confidence she had wielded for years crumble into raw panic. This was a woman who had mocked my dreams, dismissed my potential, and kicked me out at 16. And now, the same person who had once held all the power was standing helpless before me. I walked past her, toward the grand staircase, and motioned for her to follow. "Let me show you something," I said. She hesitated but trailed behind, curiosity mingled with dread. We reached the top floor where the old master bedroom had once been hers. It had been completely renovated into my private office, a space where I conducted business, hosted strategy meetings, and built the foundation of my success. The furniture was sleek, the technology cutting edge, and the atmosphere purposeful. Every detail reflected authority and control. "This used to be your domain," I said, my tone calm but sharp. "Now it's mine. And everything in this house, from the floorboards to the security cameras, is under my control." Her mouth opened, trying to form words, but none came out. She had no rebuttal, no leverage, no way to assert dominance. I could see it in her eyes, the recognition of defeat, the realization that the powerless kid she once tormented had become untouchable. I leaned against the desk, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of the moment sink in. "You see, Denise, the world doesn't owe you control. It doesn't owe you respect, and it certainly doesn't owe you obedience. Those things are earned through hard work, intelligence, and perseverance. You chose cruelty. I chose growth. The outcome was inevitable." Her shoulders slumped. "Alex, I didn't realize. I never thought." "You never thought," I said, finishing her sentence for her. "You never thought I'd come back stronger. You never thought I'd succeed without your guidance or approval. And now, here we are." She began pacing, muttering under her breath, desperate for some way to reclaim authority. But every step she took, every plan she made, was meaningless. The house, the power, the legacy, it was mine. She had no access, no control, no say. And the realization hit her like a physical blow. I finally addressed the final piece of business. "Denise, this house isn't a place for manipulation, intimidation, or entitlement. It's a place for growth, achievement, and respect. If you choose to stay, you do so under my rules. No exceptions, no privileges, no special treatment. You will treat everyone here with dignity. Or you leave. Do you understand?" Her face twisted, a mixture of disbelief, shame, and acceptance. I understand," she said quietly, almost a whisper. I nodded. "Because this house is no longer about you. It's about me, my life, and my legacy. And it always will be." For the first time in years, she was truly silent. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. The person who had once terrified me, who had used fear and cruelty to assert dominance, now had no influence. The house that had been a source of pain and rejection had become a fortress of achievement, independence, and authority. In that moment, I understood something profound. Revenge isn't about making someone suffer. It's about reclaiming your life, building something greater than your obstacles, and standing tall despite the people who doubted you. The satisfaction comes not from their fear or humiliation, but from the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you have risen, and they cannot touch you. Denise left the house that day, quietly, without further argument. She realized that she no longer held any power and that every attempt to regain it was futile. I didn't need to gloat or punish her. My life, my achievements, and my independence spoke louder than any words could. The house, once a symbol of rejection and cruelty, had been transformed into a sanctuary of success and resilience, and I, the child she had kicked out at 16, had become the master of my destiny, a living testament to perseverance, intelligence, and the power of self-belief. From that day forward, every glance, every decision, and every step I took was a reminder. I had survived, I had grown, and no one, Not even the person who once held the world over my head could ever take that away from me. The reckoning was complete, and it was beautiful.